he looks ferocious when he's fighting, right? When they're giving us that preview or that idea of what he looks like in training or in sparring. That's when he probably shot over a period of five minutes, and that's all.
Also, the other guy's not really fighting back, right?
Yeah.
Like when he's punching, he's throwing punches at his trainer.
Yeah.
Yes, the sound effects and the explosiveness, it translates as, oh my goodness, Iron Mike still has it, or if he's throwing punches at the back, but then when you see him with another human who's moving around and trying to punch him back, not the same thing. Welcome to yet another episode of To and From. My name is Jay, and as always, I'm joined by Chuck. How you doing, Chuck?
I'm well, thanks, man. I'm wearing my Bafana shirt just to suggest that I recognize you. I see you boys. We've qualified. We just need to do the big one, the World Cup, but all on track.
Yes, the pride of the nation. There are many prides of the nation, but maybe one national team that is... at the moment, not quite filling South African fans with all that joy are the Proteas, Chuck. The Proteas lost 3-1 in the T20 series against India. That last match at the Bullring in Johannesburg, India putting up 283, which the Proteas responded with, I believe, 148 and obviously failed to chase down. Chuck, big scores from the Indian boys and ultimately a convincing series win. What happened in the series?
Man, I don't know. I mean, look, Rob also suggested that he wants to test out a couple of players. I don't know if these were the opponents to test things out against, because I mean, I remember seeing the first score, right? Because I think I went out and then I saw the score just before the change of innings, and I was like, 200, okay, not too bad. I was like, once Jay said we're not playing ODIs, it's T20. It's like, okay, 200 is a serious score. Let's see how we go about that. We failed in that one. Won the second game, and then from then on afterwards, they've just been putting mammoth totals on the board, Jay. When I saw 23, Jay, I was like, do I even want to see the run chase? Like, what's the point? Because that's a ridiculous number. I mean,
yeah.
I can't even fathom. Like, how do you prepare mentally? Okay, from the goal, we're gonna go at 15 and over or whatever. From over number one, you can't even set. Yeah, I know, it was crazy. What went wrong, Jay? I think what I saw wrong is mentality. Like because what India did was they made sure that they bat first. When they put up those big totals, they bat first, and then the total is imposing, it's daunting, right? And I think our psyche or our mentality in terms of going about that chase was wrong in all those games except for the one that we won. Because I think, Jay, as much as the game requires you maybe to score 20 and over, let's start off by scoring 15. Get the feel of things, right? And then in over number 3, when we've established some sort of partnership, then we go for 20, 21, 22 to catch that up. But if we were trying to go 20 from ball number 1, you see the loose strokes, Jay. You see us get greedy at times, because I think in game number 1, Malcolm hits the first ball for a 4 or something. Like, okay, fine. The second one, he nicks behind you. Like, you just got greedy. You just started your innings out. You got a boundary. It's fine for the over. You don't have to swing at every ball. Same thing we saw with Klaas in the first game, and then you see in the latter games, game 4 and game 3 and game number 4. You see Malcolm swinging wild. You're like, Malcolm, it's fine. You got a boundary. Let's chill. You know what I mean? But what I saw, I think, as an issue was our approach to the Indian batting. The Indian bowling. Their bowling was exceptional. Never mind that they've got 200 on the board. I think they would have defended in many of those games 150, 140 because they were bowling that well. I think that standard stance of just exposing off stump and leg stump, guys, the textbook is out the window. Stand on off stump and just swing for anything, because at that point you're not trying to defend line and length. You're looking to go big. And so if you're going to take that standard approach, when you see Riza get that pearl of a ball that beats him all ends up through the gate, you're like, Riza, you shouldn't be standing there. We're trying to swing bat here. We're not trying to be methodical. We're not trying to be patient with this innings, because we have to go. So just that approach, you're going to either stand a bit wide of the wickets, stand a step outside the crease, because the bowlers, Bishno, Chakravarti, are not giving us any reprieve. So try and make them think differently. For as long as you're that standing target and they've got you where they want you and they're applying the pressure, because at some point they're getting dot balls for fun and you're like, it's not going well for us. So I think, to answer your question briefly, Jay, what went wrong is that we didn't think on our feet. I don't think we had the right game plan going to those chases. And also the biggest factor of all is that India was just amazing. India was spinning. They didn't come to play. They came and they smashed us. They were there. Yes, we had players who were inexperienced, but yeah, we were made to feel the might of Indian cricket.
Yeah, Chuck, man, we're wrong. We're embarrassed. We're embarrassed. I don't mind losing, right? Because you lose like every now and again, or you lose in sport. This is a high level sport. This is international sport, and this Indian team were labeled perhaps as the B team, but we know Kohli and the captain have moved away from T20s, right?
Yeah,
but. Yeah, this Indian team do not play like a B team, so you should expect that they'll be competitive and they'll win. And the Proteas will lose some of these games, but there's a way to lose, man. Like when you lose that heavily, like, and I use the word embarrassed, Chuck, and I don't know if maybe I'm being a prisoner of the moment or it's the emotions of having lost and in the way that we've lost. But I feel every so often this is what the Proteas do. They embarrass us, like. Chuck, top of my head, right? I'm thinking 2003 World Cup. We've got no business being knocked out of the tournament because of rain, and we don't advance deep in the tournament. That 624 partnership between Kumar and Jayawardene, the first ever 200 scored by a batsman in ODI, Sachin Tendulkar, happened against South Africa. The fastest ever triple century happened against South Africa, Virender Sehwag. And India absolutely love subcontinent teams. They just love like putting these numbers and these records on the Proteas. And Chuck, it's that like where it feels as if when the dam has broken, we have no backbone to respond, and which is ironic, right? Because what South Africa is known for predominantly in world sport is how we never give up. Or how we fight back, and that is most glaring, for example, in that 4-4-3-8 game. But that's a once in a lifetime kind of performance, and when they put up 283 at the Boring, you didn't think that you'll chase that down. The likelihood of chasing that down, it doesn't matter who you are, is very slim, right? But give it a right old go. Because when Rob Walter comes out afterwards and says, well, what's going to happen is you're either going to chase it down or you're going to fall way short. There's no in between. And I don't like that, because it feels as if what they had decided amongst themselves, like, we're not going to be able to get this. Even if you don't get it, and like at the end, the approach, can we see the approach that we actually went out with a mindset that we're going to give our absolute best to get there, get to 250. Get to 240, but like to fall limp like that, as I'm saying, Chuck, it's embarrassing. And in terms of the play itself, right, some things that didn't go quite right for the Proteas. First, on the bowling side, you have Ngaba Peters playing his first games in South Africa. You have Simelane, who has been recalled from the Wilderness and is playing for the Proteas. You didn't play Bartman at all, and for me, he was one of our best bowlers in that T20 World Cup. And at some point, we dropped him and never looked in his direction. And in these games, you mentioned the fact that Rob Walter wants to build a large base of players. He wants to build that depth. But then you're not going to play the players who have been selected. They're not going to get a look in any of these games. What's the point of that? And when you do look at that bowling, you compare it to what India have, for example. Start with the seam bowling, right? With Arshdeep Singh, he's moving the ball off of the wicket. Our bowlers, it was gun barrel straight the entire time. There was no variety whatsoever. It honestly was, there was a sense that those Indian batsmen could stand there and they knew exactly what was going to happen. And there was no fear in terms of, well, I might get one that does something that I'm not prepared for. There's no variety in our bowling. And then when you look at on the spinning side of things, we had Keshav, and our second spinning option was Makram. Like that's what we go against India. Like that, those are our spin options. So there's the question in terms of what is happening in terms of the coaching. There are questions around what are we looking at, and with regards to what you're looking at, is the talent pool not there? And if it's not there needs to be from the top to the coaching systematic wide. We need to go find players who will play the brand of cricket we want to play. Because the director of cricket, he does say that he wants to play an aggressive style of cricket, right? And if we want to play that style, we need to go groom those players. We need to go find those players rather than, well, we're drafting in everybody and let's see what happens. Because if you do then compare that with India have come from a period where they did play more conservatively. And then a decision was taken that they are going to play more aggressive. And what we have seen in the form of results, not only did they win the T20 World Cup this year, their first international triumph in a tournament in 11 years, but when you look at their record, Chuck, and maybe this is a bit of reprieve for the Proteas, it is absolutely ridiculous. This year, they've played 26 T20 internationals. They've won 24 of them.
Chalk and cheese.
In those games, they've scored over 200 runs 9 different times in an innings. And they're scoring a boundary like in the form of a 4 every 4.68 balls. They're scoring a 6 basically every 2 overs. And they come out with this mentality. That's why you have Samson?
Yeah, Sanju Samson, yeah.
Samson. Mm-hmm. So you have Samson who has 300s this year, if not 400s. And you've got Varma as well, who along with Samson scored 2 centuries in the series. You look at the Proteas, you did not really think to yourself there's anyone who's going to even go put up 70 from our side. And I know a century is not something you tend to see in T20s, but Chuck, it's not an anomaly anymore with the Indian side that they are scoring these many centuries by the individual batsmen, and they are getting to scores of 283. They put up 297 not so long ago. It's because there has been a change of mindset. They've embraced that, and they play without any fear. Whereas with the South African batsmen, you sometimes get a sense that they're afraid to lose their wickets. And for me, Chuck, I'm looking at those batsmen and asking myself, the big name player batsmen, like they've made their names in the IPL and other tournaments around the world. But when it comes to the Proteas, it's so much more hit and miss, so much more miss than hit, in fact, because someone like a Klaasen, right, who for the last few years, all I've heard is that this is the best middle order batsman in the world. And there was a fighting century in the World Cup, and there was that partnership that he had with Miller, also against Australia, but also in the 50 over game. But we're chasing 283, and you give us a duck. Like in this series alone, this man is being paid 48 million rand, for his IPL franchise, and. Again, I'm not expecting you to go and score a century every single time you walk out there. But man, give us more than what you've given us. Because as I'm saying, I'm hearing that these are the best batsmen in the world. But then when they put on the Proteas colours and it's time to do something remarkable, which again I'm hearing your talent is able to do that, they don't produce. It's so despondent, Chuck. And it's so disappointing as well. As I'm saying, man, to have a packed bull ring after what happened in the pink ODI, which again was a packed bull ring, and that game was over within 2-3 hours against this very same opponent, and you have them right there to try tie the series, and you go out like that. It's embarrassing, and quite honestly, it's not good enough.
Jay, when you think about the fact that in a couple of months' time, when the SA20 does kick off, the very same players, as you said, are going to shine again. You're like, that's why the Josie, maybe just let me say Cape Town, Mumbai Indians signed this player, because I know of that particular franchise. And the Sunrise Eastern Cape, that's why they signed that player. And you get to see what they're good at, But in the Proteas, green and gold, that's very different completely, Jay, because when you think about the mentality, I agree with you, Jay, in terms of let's at least put up 200 in a 280 chase where we can say, okay, we can go at 10 and over. This is what this side can do. Because at this point in time, we can't rely on the batting, can't rely on the bowling. If we concede 200 runs, we can't even say, okay, guys, it's your turn, we failed. We've both failed on both sides.
That's it.
Yeah, and it sucks, man, because when I saw someone like Ryan Rickleton, I'm like, okay, he's got quick hands, he's good for this kind of game. Except for game number 1, nothing else, not much else. It was very disheartening at the number of wickets that fell in that chase of 283. We went for 20 for 4 or something like that, and you're like, guys, we need to get to 283. There's already 4 wickets down without much on the scoreboard. And so those kind of things here are a bother to our cricket in terms of, fine, let's not play the aggressive cricket like everyone else in the world does. Let's restrict them to 150 then. If we can't back it up with the bat,
it's not going to happen, Chuck, because the world of T20 has moved on. There's no restricting teams to those scores anymore, and you can gather this from the last IPL where they were consistently scoring 220 in the IPL, and some pitches weren't giving as much. And when you come to South Africa, you best believe a good T20 team and where the game is right now is going to put up 200. So we can't have that mentality anymore where we're going to try restrict, which is why I say like we need to be more aggressive. We need to adopt the same mindset and read the lay of the land that we also need to go out there and put up these big scores, because the idea that we're going to try to restrict, because it's not really going to work, especially this game continues to evolve towards the batsman, and we need to move along with that train, because when we don't, as we saw in this recent series against the Proteas, against India, these are the results. Embarrassing.
Yeah, man, because if you take that side, put them in the Highveld, in one of the smaller stadiums, 280 becomes a result, right? So we need to respond. When you look at Australia-Pakistan series, it's back and forth. West Indies, England, it's back and forth. But with us, we just got routed, Jay. Except for that one game, we got routed, and you're like, we have to compete at some point, basically is what I'm saying. At some point, we have to put our foot down so people say, oh, these guys have got some game in them. Because I think from game number one, they thought to themselves, we've got them. The one game, if we're honest, was a blip on their end, because if you look at their total 124, if I'm mistaken, that's the difference. That's an anomaly. We look at the fact that every other game scored 200 plus.
Yep.
So we need to step up in a major way, Jay. This can't be the Proteas. This can't be where we are right now, because I think there is players that you can get behind, players that you can back, like you said, Bartman and the likes. I think I like the cameo by Stubbs. Showed a bit of maturity when everyone else around him was falling. Hats off to Jansen. Those big levers. He can hit a long ball, right? But we need more from everyone in the team, because as you're saying, Klaasen, Markram, Miller, guys, come on. Like, give us 20. Give us a regular 20. Give us a regular 30 if you're not going to go for half century. So we can say, at least we're getting 20 or 15 balls. It's something to work on. But if you're getting ducks and we're not getting starts, basically, we can't do much with that.
Yeah, and if not them, as I say, we need to go find those players. And they need to put up their hands in domestic cricket. Would it be nice if we just stole that World Cup final against India, because none of it would matter, right?
Yeah.
But Chuck, world champions, the Springboks, second game in that autumn series against England. Another win for the Springboks. 29-20 against England losing a third match in a row after New Zealand and Australia. What did you make of the Springboks' performance in that one?
Not the best in terms of how clinical we can be. Not the best in terms of decision making. Sometimes I think the ball could have gone through hands quicker or further down the line, so we involve our backs more. Because I think there were moments in the game where there was space to exploit. Right. Also, not everyone played particularly well, but the guys that shone reminded us of their quality. I think obviously Cheslin Colby was just magic. Right. Jasper Wiese, hats off to him on that day, because obviously he didn't cross the try line like Colby did, but what a shift, what an immense talent, and I think he staked a very good claim for a spot in that jersey. Damien Dialender, you remember, that's why he was said to be one of the best centers in the world, because he does things like that. Grant Williams, not at that level, but definitely better off than Jaden Hendrickse. I think not only the try scoring and him with the quick feet, but I just think that quick ball, that part of his game where you're thinking, I don't know what's about to happen next. Whereas I think Hendrickse was a bit more predictable against Scotland. So I think those players stood out. So I think all in all, I think as a cohesive unit, I think that's what you want from your team, right? Because you want to have those moments of magic, those moments of brilliance, but you want to win the game in the end. Because I felt with Marcus Smith against Australia that he did not deserve to be on the losing side, because he played so well. He put in another shift against the Springboks, to no avail, because there just wasn't enough to back him up. And I think with what we have in the Springboks is that come rain or shine, good day, bad day, we're gonna pull it through. And ultimately, that's what makes us world champions. That, I mean, against England in the World Cup, England started very well. Against France played a good game, but in the end, the Proteas know how to bring it home. And so I think that's the difference in the end, Oguti. Even though our discipline cost us towards the end of that game, not too much so, because England could not punish us because they couldn't come to the party. So I think, Jay, I'm happy that we're still winning. The momentum keeps going on, and we still keep building. But I think question marks over a couple of players, but overall, can't complain too much.
Yeah, where England are concerned, Marcus Smith was just brilliant. The kind of form that he's showing justifies why he's playing that number 10, and ahead of maybe someone of the style of a George Ford, and it's justified, right? And he also can kick for goal. So that's a plus for him, that he can run the game, and he's a running fly half, and he's also able to keep the points going with these kicks for Paul, right? And also on the England side, which was a positive for them and a negative for us, man, they abused our short kings at the back there. Freddie Stewart was a man amongst boys, literally in the air with those high balls. Yeah, they're called contested kicks, but there was just no contest. Fortunately
Jay,
for
if
us,
I interject, Joe, I think if Fassi stepped up, I think he didn't have the best game at 15. If he was winning more of those balls, maybe. Because I think when I saw Pollard coming in, he was claiming those balls from the sky with confidence. I was like, Fassi, isn't that what you do on a regular basis? If that happened, maybe we change things or the tide at least.
It didn't though, right? It didn't, and England, Freddie and those boys were feasting on those high balls. As I'm saying, fortunately for us, other than that, he doesn't really have much to his game, which is why there's calls for him to maybe play as an inside center rather than as a fullback, because also defensively, and that showed in that try. Maybe it's unfair to say that he conceded, but he was the last man. He was the man facing up to Grant Williams, and yeah, Grant Williams just like stepped him out of his boots, which then brings me to the Springboks. Grant Williams, to begin with, that's the X factor he gives you at scrum half. That at any given time he can go off like that, shoot out of a cannon, and it's the points, right?
Can we say? Sorry to interrupt you yet again, because I mean, Springboks, right? We're on the other side of the coin versus the Proteas. He's finally put his game together. I think this is the first time where we've seen everything that we've hoped Grant Williams can do for the Springboks, and I think it's come to the fore in this particular game.
Yeah, in this game, that was maybe his best version. Well, actually, he played brilliantly against Scotland as well. When he came in against Scotland, we didn't see any of those like darting runs. But what we did see is the fast ball out of the ruck, and because our ruck area is a bit of a mess at the moment, and the other teams like loose trios and their forwards are dominating that part of the game. So you do need your scrum half to go in there and get that ball out as quickly as possible, which he showed us against Scotland. Then again in this match. And what I think the takeaway for me, like with that Grant Williams performance and try, is what we relied on quite a bit in this match was individual talent. Because when you do consider the tries, there is that Grant Williams try. There's 2 blocked kicks to lead to a try. First Eben, and then it's Peter Steff, and then it's the try. And then you've got Cheslin doing Cheslin things, right? The first try is, again, the individual brilliance of Mani Libok in terms of that cross kick pass. And that is perfectly timed, because by the time the ball gets to Cheslin, he's able to grab it and step out of the way of the defender who overcommitted, who had to do that to try get man and ball. But because of the precise timing of that pass, which maybe there's no one else in the world who's able to quite do that, maybe Willie Leroux, we saw against Scotland. And then again at the end, it is Damien Delinde like just bursting through 2 defenders and giving the pass, and Cheslin doing what Cheslin does with his magic feet. So there was a lot of individual brilliance. Those tries did not come much from a set piece or a set attacking ploy. In terms of the things that were set, those didn't go brilliantly. We didn't see our scrum come to the fore as much as we did the previous week and previously. The line out is a work in progress. It was clumsy. And we keep going to the 4-man line out, and I understand why. We're trying to get more numbers in terms of forwards in the attacking line, and I do say work in progress because I'm not yet ready to say we should absolutely scrap that. And maybe the guys who are playing with regards to Eben as well as Sneeman are not maybe the best in terms of calling lineouts. So when you do have a Mostert who's in there, who's a practitioner, quite of the highest level, right, in that regard. So when you do have him back, that maybe is going to look better. And also, as I'm saying, we're going to work on that 4-man line out where it does yield the fruit that we wanted to. But overall, not the greatest game from the Springboks, but we did get the result over the line. The final word I'll give to Andre Pollard. Pollard is that guy. He's just simply that guy, right? Because once again, Mani Libok was struggling with the boot. Pollard comes in, and when you look at Pollard and you consider him, he's not the best at running the game. He's not the best defender. He doesn't have the greatest pace. You wouldn't categorize him as a magician or someone who absolutely makes the backline play. But when it's time to win a match, Pollard will do the things that are needed in order to win that match. You pointed out the fact that he came in and he was brilliant under the high ball. We're struggling with it. He comes in and he's able to get those balls, right? He's able to get the possession for us. And then when it's time to kick for poles, does not matter where he was kicking from. It was automatic. And when you consider Pollard maybe in games not of maybe the highest stature or it's crunch time, he reverts maybe back to a little normal, you know. But when he recognizes that we are in the end game and it's time to be clutch, oh man, he has ice in his veins and there's no one quite like him. So we are able to lean on the individual talents when the cohesiveness is not quite there as we'd like it to be. And that's a good thing, you know, that we do have superior talent to maybe the other teams that we play against. And ultimately, it is about winning, and the boys continue to win.
Yeah, I think the boys continue to win simply because of timing and game management. Because when you think about when we scored our tries, it was at the back of that Marcus Smith piece of magic. We're like, oh, England are up, they just scored a try. It's going to be a good game until we have those 2 blocks and we score another try. We score early in the second half as well. So we always up ahead and we've got them under pressure. Game management as well, Jay, because I think, 1, our defense was good when it needed to be. 2, I think we always chose the right option in terms of how to manage the game and how to best utilize what we have on the pitch. I say that in contrast to the other team who might be maybe third strongest side in the world, Australia after Ireland, because New Zealand. I saw them out against France and I'm like, okay, 75 minutes on the board, go for the line out. And they win for the penalty because the line out gets them closer to the try line and they probably win that game off the back of a try. And they didn't do that. And I think a lot of teams around the world are struggling in terms of decision making. I think same thing with England. They bring on George Ford and he misses. Wrong decision against New Zealand. What they were doing in the last couple of minutes where we were doing infringement upon infringement, conceding lots of penalties, but they couldn't capitalize.
Yeah, there's a point where they should have gone for poles and they went for the line out and then they lost the line out.
Yeah, and you're like, guys, decision making sometimes can win you those games. So I think for as long as we've got that individual talent and we're deciding what to do in the right moments and we're coming through with that, I think we're in good state. So yeah, at this point in time, when it does come together, we'll look ferocious once again. We'll look fearsome against. But I think, we'll take what we have. That's another win. And we can't really complain about that, Jay.
A final word, Chuck, on Mane Libbok, because we've spoken about him before in terms of what to do with him in the Springbok setup, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, he was just born at the wrong time. Like if he was born in the early to mid 80s and he was someone who was then available for that period of Jake White being the Springboks coach leading up to the 2007 World Cup, he would have been brilliant. Like he would have been SA Rugby's like fan favorite because we absolutely would have called for him to play as the 10. You think back to the 2007 Rugby World Cup and it's Butch James who's playing in the 10 and mainly because of his defense, right? You wouldn't have had to ask him to kick because Percy Montgomery was right there. In this current Springbok setup, that's the way to utilize him. You have to have someone in the team to kick, but we're not going to deploy Pollard as a fullback. Our fullbacks are very much Vili Willemse as well as Palele Fassi, and none of them are kickers. But in that Jake White team, oh man, he was going to cook so much, Chuck.
Options with the boot.
Exactly. Unfortunately, he's in the wrong era. He's in the wrong era unless he learns to kick, which it hasn't looked like that is something that's gonna develop in his game. He still has time. I do hope he can do that because he's a very talented player, right? But in the absence of that, especially then when Pollard comes in and does what he does, it kind of makes you go, it's hard to justify why he plays in that team ahead of someone like a Pollard or Mngomezulu when he does come back.
Well, he still has time, you say, Jane. We'll see if he can make use of that opportunity. Jake Paul fought a man who didn't have much time, or in fact, whose time has passed in the boxing ring. He was like, "Do you have it in you to have one more?" You know, and that was Iron Mike Tyson. I don't know if the iron is still applicable, but we saw this weekend Jake Paul fight against Iron Mike Tyson, and should I dare say, surprise, surprise, Jake Paul wins that fighting someone who's nearly 60 via unanimous decision where he completely dominated Mike. And some people who tweeted would say, we're just happy that he made it through that boxing bout because he's nearly 60 and he's still alive, you know. Jake Paul just keeps getting money from our pockets because we want to see these things happen, and he keeps on winning. What do you make of that fight? Is it another farce, or did you have a bit of interest in this one?
First of all, right, that fight was broadcast on Netflix. Netflix, if you want to stream live sport, you've got some ways to go, because there we were, like with the stream like kicking us out and crashing all over the place throughout the world on all of us, So I, for example, only got to watch the match, the fight afterwards, because I was so frustrated I gave up. So that's one. In terms of the fight itself between Jake Paul and Mike Tyson, Chuck, there's a nostalgia thing that happened here, right? Yeah. Because if you're old enough to have seen Iron Mike Tyson in his absolute pomp, he left an indelible mark in your psyche that when you hear that he's going to fight again, you want to see what's still there, what part of the animal still exists. And if you've never seen him, Mike Tyson is one of those athletes who you've heard about. Like, if you were born at a time after Mike Tyson was a professional boxer, you've heard about the most dangerous man on the planet, the baddest man on the planet, and you've seen the clips. You've heard him say that he wants to eat people's babies. Like, you've seen him bite people's ears off. You've seen the clips on YouTube of him knocking people out in the first 2 rounds consistently, and you've heard about him being the youngest ever heavyweight champion. And so there's a myth around this guy, like, who is Mike Tyson in the ring. And so both sets of those people would have tuned in to see that fight. But then what we did see was a man who only managed to land 18 punches in 8 rounds. And I was terrified for him at some point, Chuck, because in the first round, he won the first round, and he maybe won the second round as well. But very quickly, you realize that you were watching a man who is almost 60. His legs are nowhere. And you saw him bouncing around, trying to move around in that trademark Iron Mike style, but you see what the mind remembers, but the body has completely forgotten, because his body was just not complying at all with Mike Tyson, the fighter, as you knew him. And so for the longest time in that fight, he was a punching bag. He was there to be had by Jake Paul. And if maybe I'm going to tip my head off to Jake Paul for anything, it's the fact that he didn't actually, he held back, because he could have knocked Mike Tyson out. He could have hurt Mike Tyson. Mike Tyson could have been hurt, and I really do hope this is the last time we see him in a boxing ring. But Jake Paul held him up, partly maybe because he was considerate of his health, but also because he knows that there are people watching, and let's go all the way to the end. But in terms of Mike Tyson himself, as I'm saying, it really was an old man against a young pup. When you consider the age difference between these two people, if referencing that fight against Evander Holyfield, where he bit off his ear, whether you watched that or you didn't, that fight happened in June of 1997. Jake Paul was born in January of 1997. If that doesn't tell you how far apart these two people were, these two fighters. And yes, Jake Paul is nowhere near on the level of a prime Mike Tyson, but he's good enough as a boxer where you put him into the ring. It doesn't matter if it's a former world champion or it's you and me off the street. He's going to hurt that person, So I hope we've seen the last of Mike Tyson in the ring. In terms of the fight itself, there's nothing to say about the fight, because it was a farce. It was a farce.
Yeah, and I mean, I saw on social media someone saying that they were cues that they were giving each other in terms of don't throw this punch now, don't do that.
It was wrestling, Chuck. Yeah. That's what it was.
It was just them clinching and 18 punches. Like, Mike, why did you even wake up? Why did you get out of bed to throw 18 punches over 8 rounds?
For the bag, man.
I guess, right? Here's where I tip my hat off to Jake Paul. Jay, he has us still intrigued. He beat Mike Tyson unanimously, right? And then I don't quite remember what the tweet was, but Jake Paul did reply to Bertebiev, who says, come, let's do it. Because we all don't know how good actually is he, because he keeps fighting washed out UFC fighters, or fighting Nate Robinson, who's a basketball player who knows nothing about boxing, and he's much bigger than him. And then he fights Mike Tyson, who's an old man who was ferocious in his time. But you're like, how good is he? And the questions keep popping up, because we want to see him get knocked out, number one. Number two, every time we say he's going to lose this time, he doesn't, And so every time he puts up a fight, we want to go see it. So in terms of intrigue and the mystique of it, or the curiosity about how good is Jake Paul or when is Jake Paul going to get knocked out, that still goes on. And I think he's built a very good brand in terms of us wanting to see him fight. Iron Mike, don't do it again. I completely agree with you, Jay, because he looks ferocious when he's fighting, right? When they're giving us that preview or that idea of what he looks like in training or in sparring. That's when he probably shot over a period of five minutes, and that's all.
Also, the other guy's not really fighting back, right?
Yeah.
Like when he's punching, he's throwing punches at his trainer.
Yeah.
Yes, the sound effects and the explosiveness, it translates as, oh my goodness, Iron Mike still has it, or if he's throwing punches at the back, but then when you see him with another human who's moving around and trying to punch him back, not the same thing.
If I'm not mistaken, I think I heard Roy Jones's voice in commentary or something like that in the build-up to the fights. I think I have to blame Roy Jones as well, because he on the podcast, I think Andre Ward, he said in that exhibition fight with Mike Tyson, he got punched in the chest. He felt like he was kicked by a horse. Like, come on. If you say things like that, it makes us think there's still something there with Mike.
The power is the last thing to leave you, right?
Yeah.
The power is still there. Not quite as when he was like young, of course. But there's a punch. There's a jab, I believe, a left jab that he landed on Paul. I think in the first or second round. It rocked Paul.
Yeah. But there was nothing much after that.
There's no follow-up. That's the thing. He can't then move in and execute any combinations, because once again, the legs were just like, there was cement and they were just like, no. Chuck, in terms of what you mentioned with Artur Bertebiev, so Jake Paul, he responded to the call out from Artur Bertebiev, and he says that this is validation of his standing in the game, and he goes on to say that he runs the game. Do you believe Artur Bertebiev calling out Jake Paul is validation of Jake Paul's standing in boxing?
Nah, I don't think so. I mean, he got the right eyes onto the content, right? Watching the match. When Artur Bertebiev speaks, a man of few words, and he's speaking to Jake Paul, I don't think it's validation. I think it's someone who wants to put him in his place, because that's what everyone wants to see. Jake Paul get put in his place, because you're not fighting real guys, or this guy is old, or whatever the case is. Everyone wants to then say, fight against a real fighter. And looking at the size of Jake Paul, Bertebiev is more around his weight class, So I don't think it's validation, Jay, because I still think he wouldn't last if you had to put him in an actual division with people who train and who fight for a living. I don't think he gets the belt. Against the guys that he's handpicking, yes, he's going to win. So validation, I don't think for me it makes him a legit boxer. It makes him better than me. He's probably going to beat me, but against other guys who do this crowd for a living, I don't think he does that.
Yeah, I don't think Artur Bertebiev calling out Jake Paul validates his standing in boxing. In fact, what I think that is that Artur Bertebiev just wants to beat the snot out of Jake Paul, because he feels about it the same way that we feel, that we want to see Jake Paul get it handed to him by a real boxer. So, and I mean, it would be an opportunity for Bertebiev to get a payday for not much work, really, because you imagine Bertebiev would absolutely smack Jake Paul. So I think what that is step into the ring with a real fighter and let's expose you for the fraud that you actually are. I don't know if you want to even say that Jake Paul has done well to win the fights that he has, because the first time he stepped into a ring with anything resembling a real fighter, he lost, right, against Tommy Fury.
Yeah.
And you imagine if he gets into the ring with a Bertebiev will beat Jake Paul. So I think what happened there is Bertebiev he just wants to expose Jake Paul, and he wants to do it with the lights turned brightest and him walking away with a little cash in his pocket.
Yeah, actually, I don't think it's validation, because it's not like he's going to say, okay, let's fight. He's still going to handpick the same guys that he's picking. It's just a matter of he was recognized by Bertebiev. That's that. Jay, in the MSG, Madison Square Garden, you had Trump, the soon incoming president of the United States. You had Elon Musk. You had Kid Rock. You had all these names. And they were there, I like to think, to see fights, but ultimately see the GOAT. And that is Jon Jones, who went up against Stipe Miocic, who is the most successful heavyweight fighter, I'd say, in the UFC at this point. And Jones is defending his belt against Stipe. And Jay, what did you make of that fight? Do you think Jones still has it to go again, so that we find the answer, the Tom Aspinall or maybe Alex Pereira question?
So Jon Jones said that he's not leaving, right? He pulled a Wolf of Wall Street and said that he is not leaving, he is staying. So we're going to see him fight again. In the fight against Stipe, man, Stipe did announce after the fight that he's done, and shout out to him because he should be done. because we speak about Mike Tyson and how his legs looked like lead. That's the same thing I felt, right, watching Stipe, because when you contrast to Jon Jones is throwing the high kicks. He throws the heel kick that eventually ends the fight. And when I think specifically about the high kicks he was throwing to Stipe's face, I couldn't quite imagine Stipe doing that. He didn't do that. I couldn't quite imagine him doing that because he looked so stiff in that ring. And there was such a difference in terms of one of these guys. Jon Jones does look like someone who is still an active fighter. I know you are of the opinion that he doesn't quite look at his absolute best or as he did in his absolute prime. But again, Stipe did make him look good, because at this point in their careers, yes, Stipe has a steeped history in the heavyweight division in the UFC, but he's not that guy anymore. He hadn't fought for as many years as he did. He's been busy as a firefighter, and yeah, man, he had one last payday, and he's going home. His legacy is set in stone. There was nothing really to prove for him. What we did learn is the fact that he's not at a level where he should be competing for the heavyweight championship. And in my head, I thought to myself, if he does land something, because it could happen in pugilistic sports where he does knock out Jon Jones and now he's the champion. What then? Like, was he going to feel a pressure to continue to fight? Because I do think he came into that fight maybe wanting to test out where the level is, but more knowing that this is going to be his last dance. And it became very clear against what someone who many people consider the GOAT, Jon Jones, that he's not quite at the races anymore. Kudos to Jon Jones. He made light work of that. You did imagine that's probably how it's going to go. What it does do is it raises the choruses in terms of he should be fighting someone like Tom Aspinall rather than someone like Stipe, because maybe you might say that's a Jake Paul versus Mike Tyson situation there.
Yeah, for as long as Stipe was out here, I don't even think he had a proper camp. I think he was just training just to be fit. Because when you had him on the mic, it wasn't even a matter of, I've been thinking about leaving the sport for the longest time. I was like, no, I'm done. Thank goodness it's done. Like,
there was no fight.
Yeah, I was like, I just came here to see if I still got it. I know for sure. And we knew he didn't have it for the longest time, because who stays inactive for that long? And then you want to fight Jon Jones? Who stays inactive for that long in the heavyweight where the guys have got knockout power in one hand? You know what I mean? So good thing he's still healthy at the end of that fight, I'd say, because Jon had fun in there. Jon had basically a mobile punching bag in front of him, because Stipe did land a couple of jabs where you thought to yourself, if you could put together a combination, you could be dangerous. But it wasn't there. It just wasn't there. Like you said with Mike Tyson, that the brain is there, but the body won't follow what the brain would want to do. Jon Jones had fun in there. Stipe was just throwing punches. Whereas MMA, you could try a takedown, you could try kick him, you could try.
There was no attempt whatsoever, right?
Do something else, yeah. So. Look, I'll tell you this though, right? With that fight, after having seen Michael Chandler, Charles Oliveira, having seen Bo Nickel and Paul, although that one was boring. That fight was boring. And the other fights preceding that, even with the ladies, this fight did happen at a slow pace. I would say that. I will concede that maybe the ducking things have a bit of legs, or they're growing on me in terms of maybe Tom is a little bit more dangerous after having seen Jon Jones back in the ring again. But I think Jon did what he had to do. I think if there was a more dangerous fighter, maybe we see a sharper Jon Jones. But Jon did what he had to do. He was at no point in the fight in danger, because Stipe just wasn't dangerous. He had his way with Stipe, and I think he put him out of his misery. I think that knockout blow was good, because he was going to continue punishing him, and I didn't think Stipe had any sort of resolve or pushback. So Jon Jones looked as good as possibly he could against a 42-year-old firefighter. That's what he was at that point, a firefighter.
Chuck, so with Jon Jones putting off retirement and there is a next fight in his future, he then says that he doesn't want to fight a dangerous up-and-coming fighter that is Tom Aspinall. He'd rather fight a dangerous established fighter that would be Pereira, right? And those two options, or anybody else who is out there, for you, who do you want to see Jon Jones fight next?
I want to see, I think the most dangerous is Tom Aspinall, because as much as Pereira has got knockout power, the average fight time for Tom Aspinall is 2 minutes, because he gets it done. There's scary Russians that Tom has put away, and you're like, okay, now you've got my interest peaked, Look, Jay, I hear the Jon Jones argument because he says that he's fought 9 champions in his time at the UFC, and if he fights Pereira, he's the 10th champion on his resume. That for legacy makes sense. Versus Tom Aspinall, who is an interim champion, which doesn't count for much, right? So I think if he fights Pereira, you'll tick the box in terms of the legacy, in terms of the copyright, but in terms of the eye test and who we're clamoring for, I think it's Tom Aspinall, man, because Tom Aspinall is young, he's hungry, he wants to prove a point. He's been looking for the Jon Jones fight for the longest of time, and that's why the fact that when Jon Jones is active again, we say fight that guy. He's been calling you out, he's been ready, he's been preparing for you this whole time. Whereas Pereira's just moved from middleweight to light heavyweight because he wants to crack at something else where he doesn't have to cut weight. I think for me the one that makes sense, as Dana White has said, is that there is no Pereira fight. The guy who wins this fight fights Tom Aspinall. I have to say that is the ultimate test. The GOAT has to be tested against Tom Aspinall.
So Jon Jones said that in order to fight Tom Aspinall, he wants a few money, and I wondered that is that what he's doing in terms of avoiding the fight or ducking that Tom Aspinall talk because he is negotiating, right? And the two guys who are in the division, who it makes the most sense for them to go up against one another, is Tom Aspinall and Jon Jones. Although Jon Jones has been on the record as saying that he is willing to give up his belt for his next fight. He would be willing to do a BMF fight, right, against Pereira. But as you say, Dana White was like, nope, that is not going to happen. And then Tom Aspinall, interestingly, he said that, yeah, he saw Dana White look in his direction a few times and have some conversations, or they hinted towards him that is a fight that is likely to happen. So we may see. And with Dana White in the UFC and how it's set up and how he's operated over the years, we tend to see the fights we want to see, right? He tends to make those fights. So there is a very high chance that we see Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall in the not too distant future. But if you're asking me which fight I want to see, who do I want to see Jon Jones go up against next, it is Francis Ngannou. Like, I know, Chuck, that as we sit here, it's impossible because Ngannou's at PLF and Dana White doesn't want to do business with PLF. And I get it, right? PFL, excuse me. Because the other promotions aren't as big as the UFC. And Dana White thinks exactly like Jon Jones. This is why these two men love each other so much, because they're the same person. Jon Jones does not want anyone to build a legacy off of his name, and Dana White is the same. He does not want to cross-promote another promotion because they're going to be living off the limelight of the UFC. This is how I think Dana White thinks. But I don't know how. I don't really care how, if I'm being very honest. But Dana White and the PFL people need to find a way, because the fight that is out there since Jon Jones moved up to heavyweight, the one fight that is the heavyweight bout to end all heavyweight bouts, is Jon Jones, the presumptive GOAT, against Francis Ngannou, because we know what we have with Ngannou. Like, he is maybe the most dangerous man in the sport. And when last seen, still brilliant. And Jon Jones, we know now he's at heavyweight. We've seen him fight twice, and he's won both of his fights, but they're not really convincing. Like, okay, yes, he ended them very quickly against a fighter who's got a great legacy in Stipe, as well as Gane, who is a heavyweight who's built as a heavyweight we've never seen before in terms of how he moves and everything else that he's able to do. But neither one of these guys are Francis Ngannou in 2024 at this point in time. So again, I don't know how he makes it happen. I don't pretty care much what needs to be done, but whatever needs to be done, get that done to get Jon Jones and Francis Ngannou in the ring. That's the fight I want to see Jon Jones partake in next.
Dana White's got beef with Ngannou still, so maybe that's another hurdle, But I completely agree with you, Jay. If ever there were cross-promotion fights or bouts, Jon Jones versus Ngannou is number one, and then Jon Jones versus Aspinall is number two. And then if Jon Jones doesn't get his money, Tom Aspinall versus Ngannou will be exciting, right? So the one championship heavyweight champion, Rug, I think he won his belt a week or two ago. He's been calling out Ngannou because he knows that those companies, Bellator, One Championship, PFL, they do business together. And so there's money to be had. There's competitions to be had where the fans can get all they want. And, to scratch that itch, because as you said, you still wonder, there's lingering questions because they had the conversation. There was that idea that if Jon Jones moves to heavyweight, Ngannou is there. But when Ngannou leaves and Jon goes to heavyweight, you're like, it can still happen, So I'm with you, Jay. I think that's the number one fight if ever that's possible. But within the organization, it has to be Tom Aspinall.
And also, it's not likely because Ngannou has his money now, right? From his boxing matches.
Jay, the fight that he fought Ngannou was his first MMA fight in that organization.
Yes.
He's been boxing
since he left. So he doesn't need to fight for the money anymore. And that's the thing we say about fighters, right? Some guys really just love fighting. The prize, of course, is important, but if you sort that out, however well off they are, they're always going to get back in the ring because there's just a thirst to go manhandle another man, to go just put your will all over another man and ask him, what are you able to do? Fighters fight. And I'd love to believe Jones and Ngannou are those guys. And I'd love to believe that Dana is someone who is able to see the tree amongst the forest. And he knows, this is the fight that needs to happen. And we'll figure it out. Chuck, ending off with a bit of football. We know we are in the international break. And some words coming through from the England captain, Harry Kane. He was asked about the players who pulled out of English national duty. And what he had to say was that he does not like the fact that they pulled out and maybe questioned if there's still as much of a desire as there was under Southgate, where when guys got the call up, they knew they were excited to come to the national team. But he mentioned the fact that it's a tough period in the season. So Harry Kane questioned the legitimacy of his England teammates pulling out of the national team, saying that perhaps they are putting club over country. Do you like these statements from Harry Kane?
Not necessarily, because I think Harry Kane is saying this. I mean, obviously the question was fielded to him and he had to answer in some way. I think he's saying this because he's now playing in the Bundesliga. Everyone knows what's happening right around the corner in December. They know that the Nations League is not going to benefit me much. Participating in a friendly and then have to go through that spell of maybe 10 games in 2 weeks and a bit. My body's going to feel that because I have to put my body on the line for my team, because most of the England players represent teams in England, so they get through playing that congested fixture list. So, Jay, I think, number one, he was put on the spot, and yeah, I guess as the captain, you have to show pride and leadership, and you can't then say, I understand they had commitments or whatever. You have to say something that's, he's fighting for the country or whatnot. But I think, never mind throwing them under the bus. I mean, I'm with the players. Never mind Harry Kane's comment. I'm with the players because I'd rather with say you're Trent Alexander-Arnold. We're on top of the log. Let's focus on winning something with Arne Slot versus just playing in Nations League. What are we going to do with the Nations League? No one cares about the Nations League if we're being really honest, except for the teams who are maybe Group A and who have a real chance. Apart from that, it's just another camp where there's nothing much on the line. So I understand why players pulled out. I understand that England is not in the best space right now because Southgate has stepped down. They've since elected Thomas Tuchel's only going to be in charge in January, if I'm mistaken. And so in the meantime, you don't quite know what your place is. You're gonna go for a training camp, Jay, and then they choose Angel Gomez over you. You're gonna go on a training camp and then Levi Cole plays ahead of you. Let the young guys play because we've got stuff to focus on. I believe so. I understand. I'm not too mad at Harry Kane, but I'm with the players.
Harry Kane saying that it is always England over club is very interesting to me because I don't know, first of all, if I agree with him. The club pays these guys millions upon millions of pounds and euros, and I'm sure they get something from the national team, but their employers are the clubs. And maybe he is talking about it from a point of pride, that you should have more pride representing your country as you do your club. And that might be true because at club level, you are a gun for hire, you're a mercenary. Whichever club you deem is worthy of your signature or offers you the best package, that's where you're going to go. So therefore, you might not love your club as much as the country, but I really don't think that is the scenario. I don't think it's a matter of, I'm more dedicated to my club than I am my country because I am more loyal to my club than I am my country. But even if that was the case, what drives that, And as I'm saying, your club are your employers. So if you are going to take a risk on your career, you're more likely to do it for your club than for your country. Pep Guardiola was on the record as well saying players go to represent their nations, they come back and they're injured, and you must just live with that. Because the national team coach, he's got his own agenda, and that is that is England. That's the English national team. And there's no real consideration for what happens at clubs because that's none of my business. So if the players are in a position to make a choice, I don't bemoan any player who might choose their club over their country. And even in saying that, it's not as like black and white like that. I'd rather play for my club than for my country. If they're healthy, they're there, which is the other thing. I did not like these comments from Harry Kane because he's pretty much questioning the legitimacy of his own teammates in terms of, are you really injured? What do you mean, fam? Like, how are you going to go in front of international media and question whether they're pulling out because they really are injured or because they're preserving themselves for this period of the season? Even if you feel that way, these guys. You've got their numbers, or you're going to see them at another camp, whatever the case may be. You are their captain. You can straight up ask them, and you can motivate your own personal beliefs around what it means to play for the country, and you can bring them along with you. That is your duty, that is your responsibility, and your prerogative as the captain of the national team, and these being the players who play under you. But when you then, as I'm saying, go out and you question if they truly are injured or they are pretty much making up injuries or making up stories so that they don't turn up for England because they couldn't really be bothered to play for England, I don't think that is behavior becoming of a captain, and he shouldn't have offered that up.
Yeah, because then what happens the next camp? Do we then say, it's all paid under the hatches? Because when you had the opportunity to speak up on our behalf, you could have said anything, basically. You chose to say that. So I think, Jay, it does make things a bit rocky with the players or their relationships. But I think also that it might be the start of something that we're going to see. It might be the start of a trend because there's just too many games and the players that keep expressing that. And if the England players can do that, I'm not expecting everyone else to do it. But if it does, I would not be surprised.
We shall see how that unfolds. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Two Up Front. Please continue to subscribe, to like, to comment, to share the videos on YouTube, on our YouTube channel. It is Two Up Front. You can listen to the audio podcast on the City of Johannesburg's online radio station, Joburg Pulse, every Tuesday and Thursdays at 6 p.m. And you can listen to the audio podcast at your leisure on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts. You can find us and interact with us on all our social media pages. It is at Two Upfront Pod. I am at J_Mzulu. Chuck is at Chuck2Up. From myself, Jay, I'm outie.
As a South African, even though the Springboks got hammered, even though the Proteas got hammered, you always have the Springboks with you, and that's our hope. This is Chuck, and I'm